Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Well, I was moved to make this video because of something I just saw on social media. It drove me a little crazy. I felt I had to respond in some way. What it was a young lady posted to a gardening related news group talking about her plans to have a career in growing plants, horticulture, and her family had been very discouraging of this. I think she reached out to the community looking for a little bit of support, and instead what she got was a barrage of responses, frankly, that were discouraging in a lot of different ways, talking about how low the pay, how long the hours, and how poor the prospects were in the horticulture industry in general. And I cringed when I saw that because I know that's the reputation of my industry, and I think probably there's a part of every industry that's a little bit like that. So in part it's true, but it's definitely not the whole truth. So I thought I wanted to try to flesh that out for you today. The reason I'm familiar with the topic myself is because I worked outside the industry for 20 years, completely unrelated retail, and then I switched in, and so I had to navigate the process of learning how to make a living in horticulture. I went to horticulture school, I got a job at a wholesale nursery growing plants, and I've also started my own horticulture related business now. So I have some idea of what it takes to succeed in this. So this video I'm going to talk about 3 general topics. I will post up here a timestamp of when I'll be talking about those. The first one is I want to explain what is horticulture. The second one I want to talk about is what kinds of jobs you can get in horticulture. What can you expect to go with that? And the third one I wanted to talk about is what you can expect when you get there. What kind of pay, what does the path look like, how hard is it, and how can you succeed in horticulture? So stick around for that. I'd like to start with a definition of horticulture that is the study and practice of growing plants. And usually it's defined as a subset of agriculture. Agriculture itself is a massive topic and includes a bunch of things that you wouldn't put in the category of horticulture. Things like raising cows for milk, raising chickens, or even farming salmon. However, other things like growing marigolds in a pot or tomato seedlings would definitely be in the group of horticulture. Okay then, so if you depicted agriculture as a big bubble, then would horticulture be a small bubble within agriculture? Well, it's not exactly that simple, because there are some things that are typically included in horticulture that are not parts of agriculture. Take, for example, something like landscaping or gardening or maintaining sports fields. All of those things that have to do with maintaining plants in the landscape, but are not traditionally considered part of agriculture. Okay, the next part is where it gets tricky. How would you classify growing, say, tomatoes or peppers in a greenhouse? Yes, because it's agriculture and because it's growing plants, you would place that inside of the bubble of horticulture. Now, how would you place growing corn in a field? Typically, that is not treated as horticulture because it's large scale crop production. So they put that into the traditional definition of agriculture, not horticulture. So you can see that there is some overlap here and some boundaries. So to simplify the definition of horticulture, let's just say it like this. If it's an ornamental plant, whether it's grown in the landscape, whether it's grown in a greenhouse, in a pot, or in the field, it's probably horticulture. If it's a veggie or an edible plant, typically we only include the plants that are grown in a greenhouse or in a pot as part of horticulture. And if it's grown in the field, more typically we consider that a part of agriculture. Simple enough? I thought not. This is the wholesale nursery where I work now. I've worked here for about 12 years. My path in was that I came in as a junior supervisor working on the load dock shipping plants, and now I've grown into a role on the growing team. So that was my path in, but there's a whole ton of different ways you can come into the industry and a whole bunch of jobs in the industry and in institutions attached to the industry. So I want to talk about that a little bit here, is kind of what jobs are available in the industry. So when I went to school, they gave me a couple of options. They said, do you want to be a landscaper or a gardener? Do you want to work in a greenhouse or nursery? Or do you want to work on a golf course? Those were sort of like the industry areas that they focused on in the school that I went to. And that sort of outlines in general categories what's available in the industry itself. But the industry, the employers in the industry, are only one way that you can enter into horticulture. There are 2 other ways I wanted to talk about. First of all, let's talk about going into institutions, so education, schools, government jobs, jobs that are attached to consulting and institutions around the industry. And the other one I want to talk about is, of course, self-employment. So between going for an industry job, going for an institutional job, or being self-employed, those are three very different paths into the industry. And now I want to talk about the value of school, of going into the industry. Because if you're considering an institutional job, like a government job, or of course teaching horticulture, you're going to have that education first. If you want to be a high-end consultant or work in a plant lab, again, you're going to have the education before you enter in. If you're going to have an industry job, it's really kind of optional. So if you want to join on a nursery like this, you can come in with no experience at all, or you can come in with some experience that may help you break through that entry-level job that I'll talk about in a minute, because that's kind of a tough barrier in the industry. The third one, being self-employed, completely up to you, whether you want to go and get some school first or whether you just want to dive right in. I've started my own business in horticulture. I'm working on it now. And I have to say that having some industry experience and some school really did help me to learn the lessons before I made mistakes. But there's no doubt that if you start in on your own as a self-employed farmer or in a landscape business, that you'll definitely learn those lessons just by necessity quite quickly, because your living depends on it. Having described now some of the general areas of employment in horticulture, I wanted to talk now about some of the specific jobs, because there's some out there that you might not even have thought of that are really good jobs if you just wrap your head around them. So for instance, one group I come in contact with an awful lot are the agricultural inspectors. These are the people who check plants for pests, diseases, and trying to ensure the safety of the food supply. They're in Canada, they work for the CFIA. Probably in the US it would be an agency like the USDA. In any case, when I've talked to these inspectors, they've described their jobs as fulfilling, challenging. The pay is good, the hours are reasonable, and because it's government, is generally pretty stable employment. The only thing you may have to deal with that I couldn't is the amount of government bureaucracy. That would drive me nuts. But that being said, comes with the territory. Now, another government type job that I've seen go well for people, for students in my program of horticulture when I went to Kwantlen, a lot of them found jobs with the municipal or city crews that maintain landscape around the cities, plantings in roadways and so on, but also the parks, the maintaining sports fields, all of that. And there is a path there where, again, the pay is good, the benefits are there, the employment is stable from year to year. It may vary or fluctuate a little bit up and down to do with city budgets and that kind of thing, which I've seen, but there are some cities that even grow their own plants from start to finish and have their own greenhouses, which I've seen locally here. So there's something to be turned over there if you want to look at it. And again, there's a prospect there to move up into some really good jobs. There are some good paying jobs in the landscape design end that work for cities and municipalities as well. Moving on to the private employment end now, let me just acknowledge right up front that in general, the larger the company you're working for, the more opportunity there is that they have specialized roles with better pay than it would be with a small firm. And a small landscape company might only have the owner and a couple of general laborers who work with them, and that pay is not great for extremely hard work. Whereas in a larger landscape company, there's generally opportunities for salespeople, for crew leaders and supervisors, for landscape architects. So that's, the bigger the company, the more opportunity. And while we're talking landscaping, I just wanted to acknowledge as well that there's a specialized end of landscaping of arborists or arboriculture, and those people have a very specialized job. It can be a little bit dangerous, but is in general very well paid, so that's something you could look up as well. Moving into the area that I'm most familiar with is the nursery and greenhouse production end of things, and again, I just want to broaden your horizon about all the jobs that are available in that industry. If you're working for a large enough nursery, they probably have a sales staff, they have people purchasing plants, they have people who are there to ship the plants and dispatch. They definitely have accounting. So they have a lot of different roles aside from just the growing crew, the people who grow the plants. And I prefer to be on the hands-on end myself. But again, it's true that the larger the company, the more opportunity it is that they have people who are better paid on the growing end. This might be the part of the video you've been waiting for. The question of how do you get your opportunity in horticulture and what does it look like once you get there. I say this next part kind of tongue-in-cheek, but almost not. The very best way to get into horticulture is to be born into it. And if you can't manage to be born into a horticulture family, then at least to be Dutch. Okay, I say that kind of joking around, but the truth is it is an advantage to be in the extended family or friends or circle of somebody who's already in horticulture. It gets you that foot in the door, or at least to share a culture or find some way to connect with these people. Because the truth is the horticulture industry, or at least the nursery and greenhouse industry here locally, is kind of dominated by families and people who have built their own businesses and then they've hired their children, their cousins, and so on. The good news for you, if that isn't your case, if you're not born into that family, is that they still need good people at a much higher rate than they can breed them or hire them from within their own families. If they're a growing horticultural enterprise, they still need good people, and all you have to do is distinguish yourself as one of those people. So here's the problem: the entry-level barrier. Everybody talks about the hard work that horticulture is, and I'm going to be straight with you. Spring in horticulture, when you're growing plants, you're shipping plants, you're in the nursery business, spring in horticulture is tough. It means a lot of heavy days of lifting plants, tagging plants, watering things, long hours, really tough work. And it can be tough in that environment. It isn't really hard to get hired at that entry-level end. It can be difficult in the rush of spring to distinguish yourself as somebody who's worthwhile making an investment in. They're going to ask more of you in that period of time than they're probably entitled to by the amount of pay that they're offering. And your trick is, not only do you have to do more than what you're getting paid for, you have to do more than what they expect to set yourself apart. And I'm going to give you a piece of advice here, kind of unsolicited, but I do say that. Push more of yourself into that job, really work hard to make an impression, but then on the flip side of that, at some point in that season, go to your supervisor, go to your boss, go to the grower, and make it clear what you want from them. Let them know you have a timeline. You're not just going to come back season after season, work hard, get laid off at the end of the season, and then return the next year. What you're asking for is you'll give them hard work, but you're asking for an opportunity, at least to go full-time year-round, or to get a junior grower position or something along those lines. So what does that look like? And I guess I should share with you a little bit of the pay scale. And this isn't going to work for everywhere. I can only talk about my local market. But once you've gotten past that entry-level end, which, by the way, can be as low as minimum wage, once you get into the sort of junior grower area, the place where you begin given some growing duties, a section grower, something like that. In my region, that's probably somewhere in the range of $18 to $20 an hour. For somebody with a little more experience on the growing end, that might scale up to in the range of $23 to $25 an hour. And then the nice thing about the industry is it goes way up from there. So head growers in very large operations can make in the range of $75, $100, $125,000 a year, just based on their duties and how large the business is. So there's definitely a living to be made there, but you just do have to get past that initial really hard step, that entry-level step into the business. That's all from me. I hope this has helped you to get some bearings in the industry. And if you have any questions at all, if you want to check with me and see if there's anything else I can tell you about one particular part of the industry or another, I'll do what I can to help. Drop those in the comments below the video. Thank you so much.